Stop and colleagues, hello. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Hello, hello. Okay. Good afternoon to everyone. Good day to those that are online. Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, friends, I'm delighted to welcome you here today. Happy World Meteorological Day. Happy 75th anniversary of the World Meteorological Organization. Today, we commemorate our 75th anniversary also as the United Nations voice on weather, climate, and water. Today, and for the whole year, we celebrate the contribution of the WMO and its members to saving lives, serving society, and protecting our planet. WMO is often referred to as the UN Weather Agency. No, 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 no. We are much more than weather forecasters. Much, much more. WMO makes the world safer, makes the world more secure and more prosperous. WMO is a platform for free exchange of data, products, and services between national meteorological and hydrological services and users. These are critical to national and international security. As you all know, weather, climate, water know no boundaries. They have no borders. And this has not changed over the years. At the same time, impressive technological advances have taken place in relatively short time frames. Satellites, IT, internet, artificial intelligence. And yes, of course, we have evolved accordingly. WMO is a lifeline for climate-sensitive sectors. For example, agriculture, transport, energy, water management, health. I usually challenge every audience to think of a single activity that does not depend on what we do. There is none. So, the WMO community adds billions of dollars of value to the global economy thanks to the timely information we provide. We save millions more in averted losses. Over the years, we have saved hundreds of thousands of lives. And we will continue to do so. It is our top overriding priority. 3 years ago, on World Meteorological Day, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres launched the Early Warnings for All initiative. It seeks to ensure that everyone, everywhere, is covered by early warning systems by the end of 2027. WMO, the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, the International Telecommunication Union, and the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies are spearheading this initiative. We are actively reaching out to embrace additional partners. We are now at the halfway point. We are proud of our progress. 108 countries now report having some capacity for multi-hazard early warning systems. This is more than double what we had in 2015. Let me make it clear. National ownership and community involvement are key to this success. But far too many people remain unprotected, many of them in the least developed world, in the small island developing states. We need to go farther and we need to go faster. The theme of this year's World Meteorological Day is therefore closing the early warning together, closing the early warning gap together. To achieve this ambitious goal, we must innovate together to scale up technologies, stand together to foster collaboration, invest together to create, mobilize, and share resources. Technological advances and tools like artificial intelligence have the potential to revolutionize weather forecasts and early warnings. And they are there. Let us use them for the global good. You will hear more about this from our eminent speakers today. These are challenging times for our community, for the global community, I would say. But I must stress that the work of WMO is more important today than at any time in our 75-year-old history. The latest WMO State of the Global Climate Report shows the urgency of the challenge. And I will just mention you some of the findings. Carbon dioxide levels are at the highest since 800,000 years. Highest since 800,000 years. 2024 was the warmest year on record, with global temperatures about 1.55 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The 10 past years were the 10 warmest on record. Each of the past 8 years set a new ocean heat record. The 18 lowest Arctic sea ice stands were all in the past 18 years. The 3 lowest Antarctic ice extents were in the past 3 years. The rate of sea level rise has doubled since satellite measurements began. Extreme weather worsened displacement, food security, and economic upheavals. We just marked the first World Glacier Day on 21st March, as well as the World Water Day on the 22nd March. Glacier retreat is triggering an avalanche of impacts on economies, ecosystems, and communities, not just in mountain regions, but at global level. The past 3 years suffered the largest 3-year loss of glacier mass on record. Each year, glaciers lost the equivalent of 30 years of water consumption. That is huge. These are not just individual numbers. These are clear trends. These are not isolated. This is a system, and the system is expressing very, very clear. To conclude, I would like to stress that 2025 is a decisive year for climate action, for sustainable development, and for early warnings for all. As we gather today, let us reaffirm our commitment. We must go farther, we must go faster, and we must go together. I thank you very much. Let me turn now to our program for this afternoon. And I'm very honored to be accompanied today by Ambassador Lauber, permanent representative of Switzerland, Ambassador Nkosi from South Africa, and Ambassador Da Silva Nunes from Brazil. Thank you very much for joining us. I also want to introduce you to Carlota Cataldi. She is an artist who is following our conversations online and will record graphically what our speakers say throughout the event. Before closing my intervention and thanking all the ambassadors here, 75 years ago, we would never imagine having a representative of the presidency of G20 with us, a representative of COP30 with us, and we are here in Geneva. Times are challenging, and we are up to the challenges. Thank you very much. Ambassador Lauber, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Madam Secretary General, Excellencies, dear colleagues, it is really my great pleasure as well to join you here today, celebrating World Meteorological Day in Geneva at the World Meteorological Organization. Happy World Meteorological Day, happy 75th. As the Secretary General pointed out, we want to focus today on the crucial theme, closing the early warning gap together. Early warning, as we all know, saves lives and livelihoods, but only if it reaches everyone on time and with clear actions to follow. This is our shared responsibility, and we must act together. Early warning must be people-centered. It must be inclusive, timely, and actionable. Weather, water, and climate services provide the evidence we need to make informed decisions. National and local governments, farmers, and communities depend on it. But warnings alone are not enough. They must lead to early action. They must reflect local needs and realities. This requires innovation. We need new technologies, better data sharing, and stronger coordination. The Early Warnings for All initiative, led by WMO, UNDRR, IFRC, and ITU, is an important step forward. It is key to make sure that this initiative is based on the articulation of all relevant partners. It needs a strong coordination that avoids duplication of efforts and builds on successful existing mechanisms. We must ensure that warnings reach the last mile, where the most vulnerable people live. Switzerland is committed to this cause. Adaptation to climate change and disaster risk reduction are key priority for us. Recognizing the WMO's central role, Switzerland is proud of its Weather for UN pilot project. It aims at strengthening the WMO's ability to support the humanitarian sector in cases of extreme weather events. As part of the Friends of Early Warnings group, we work with 17 bilateral partners to strengthen early warning systems worldwide. This is about coordination, aligning policy, financing, and implementation. Fragmentation weakens our impact. Our cooperation strengthens it. This is why we support regional partnerships. In the Andean region, we have seen the power of collaboration through Climandis and Enandes Plus. These projects are not just about delivering solutions, they're about learning from each other. They are about twinning, about peer-to-peer collaboration. This approach works, and we could expand it further. Early warning systems require sustainable investment, not just in technology, but in people, institutions, and long-term strategies. For investments to be effective, they must be accessible. Communities need to understand the warnings and have the resources to react. This means supporting capacity building, education, and local leadership. It also means ensuring that WMO regional offices, such as in the Americas, have the resources they need. Looking ahead, we are exploring ways to support regional cooperation also in Africa. We are also committed to ensuring long-term sustainability in the Andean region. This means co-founding future phases of projects based on results. It also means working together to secure new partners and resources. Excellencies, dear colleagues, we have the tools, we have the knowledge and the partnerships, but we must act now. The cost of inaction is too high. So let us innovate together, let us stand together, let us invest together, and let us ensure that early warning reaches everyone, everywhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Lauber, for your words and your reflections on the importance of collaboration, avoiding overlaps. I will now pass the floor to my colleague from South Africa. South Africa holds, as I mentioned before, the presidency of the G20 on the theme Solidarity, Equality, Sustainability. And WMO is actively contributing to the discussions on early warnings, climate, and resilience. It's an honor to have this, my dear colleague and friend. I pass the floor to Ambassador Nkosi, Permanent Representative of South Africa to the United Nations Office at Geneva. Ambassador Nkosi. Yeah.
Thank you very much, SG. Saulo, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks, SG, for inviting me to join this illustrious, distinguished panel made up of my senior colleagues, Juk and Tova, and indeed to speak to such a full audience. It's a great honor, great privilege, particularly on this special day, World Meteorological Day 2025. This event indeed is held the world over by members of the Convention of the World Meteorological Organization to mark the coming into force of the convention 75 years ago on 23 March 1950. Over the past 50 years, worldwide, more than 11,000 weather, climate, water-related disasters were reported. While the number of disasters increased fivefold, the number of deaths decreased almost threefold since the 1970s. This is thanks to improved early warnings and disaster risk reduction strategies by countries supported by the WMO, whose 75th anniversary we celebrate. And indeed, we salute the WMO for contributing to saving lives, saving infrastructure, saving property over the last 75 years. All too often, severe weather hazards cause impacts on infrastructure, agriculture, transport, energy, and health systems. As an example, in my neighborhood in Southern Africa, recently we experienced tropical cyclone Batsirai, which struck Madagascar in February 2022, causing violent winds and torrential rainfall resulting in casualties and destruction, triggering coastal and inland flooding, as well as land and mudslides. Ladies and gentlemen, South Africa uses its membership of international organizations and forums to promote international cooperation and solidarity in dealing with climate-induced disasters. In this regard, South Africa has assumed the presidency of the G20, as you have said, SG, under the theme Solidarity, Equality, and Sustainability, in order to harness global will and capabilities to confront the enormous challenges the world is facing today. This will guide South Africa's presidency of the G20 Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group in accelerating the implementation of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015 to 2030. At the heart of South Africa's presidency is the goal of moving from dialogue to concrete solutions. This will include advancing innovative financing mechanisms for DRR, promoting technology transfer, and encouraging capacity building initiatives that empower countries to effectively manage risks. South Africa seeks to position the G20 as a platform for tangible progress, where commitments to equitable and sustainable development translate into real-world outcomes that build resilience across all levels of society. The priorities of the G20 Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group were designed in response to the findings of the midterm review of the Sendai Framework and intended to accelerate the implementation of the framework. The South African presidency acknowledges the work done by India and Brazil, whose presidency ensured the strengthening of the work of the Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group. And we would like to pay tribute to these two sisterly countries, as well as the predecessor, Indonesia, by retaining all the 6 priorities agreed upon under those presidencies. As a deliverable, South Africa intends to develop an input paper on the progress, barriers, and enabling mechanisms to deliver cellular broadcasting as a scalable solution for last-mile delivery of early warning. The WMO, ITU, UNDRR can indeed play a critical role in contributing to the delivery of this ambition. SG Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, South Africa's G20 presidency further calls on global finance institutions to de-risk and support more financing for emerging and developing countries. This is born out of a need to support country initiatives aimed at addressing climate change and the just energy transition partnerships. In this regard, countries need to transition to low carbon economies in a manner that is just and inclusive, including consideration to climate change realities. In this light, South Africa has therefore identified the strengthening of disaster resilience as a priority of its presidency. The increasing rate of climate-induced natural disasters affects countries that can least afford the cost of recovery and rebuilding. Accordingly, special financing and insurance mechanisms must be made available to scale up funding for post-disaster reconstruction. It is indeed our firm view that our G20 presidency will, through solidarity, solidify international cooperation for risk reduction. This is consistent with this session's theme, closing the gap, standing together, fostering collaboration amongst countries. Further, by advancing equality, we seek to ensure that inequalities between and within states are eliminated and vulnerabilities are reduced by developing solutions that can support vulnerable communities to access much-needed cash liquidity quickly in both pre- and post-disaster scenarios. Sustainability is about tackling the present challenges without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. On this occasion of the 75th anniversary of the establishment of the WMO, allow me to conclude by calling on all member states and partners to redouble their efforts in supporting the WMO to strengthen its capacity in order to contribute to the global effort of reducing the impact of extreme weather events and climate change. As we just said, SG, further, faster, together. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Nkosi, for your commitment, for your country's commitment during all this year that you will hold the presidency before and after. Now, let me pass the floor to my friend also, Ambassador Tovar. As I mentioned before, Brazil will host COP30 in November. What a challenge. It will be very special because it marks 10 years anniversary of the Paris Agreement in this decisive year for climate action. I now give the floor to the Ambassador Tovar, Permanent Representative of Brazil to the United Nations Office at Geneva. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all of you, Excellencies, and friends of sustainability and friends of WMO. I think we first should start by congratulating the organization and the organization of this event. There's a lot to celebrate, but I think we'll leave the champagne aside and tackle what we have to do in this organization with the help of this organization. And I also want to acknowledge and a special salute to Ambassador Laubert and Ambassador Nkosi, dear friends and very important figures here of what we call the International Geneva. Right, I want to make 3 points this afternoon, very precisely. The first one is to emphasize the fact that the climate regime that we have is by no means perfect, but it must be preserved and strengthened. That's what we have. We have to acknowledge that. That's the number one point that I want to make. This regime represents decades of multilateral negotiations and institutional work, and that has delivered meaningful progress over the last 50 years at least. I think it all started in Stockholm and beyond. We cannot afford to reverse this progress. We have to go forward. I also want to emphasize the crucial role that science has played in the evolution of this regime. And this organization, and we like to call it the House of Sustainability in Geneva, is a key player in this knowledge ecosystem, providing us with solid evidence on climate dynamics. WMO's work in the early warning for all initiative, for example, demonstrates how science can help mitigate disaster risks and save thousands of lives. Most recently, the WMO reported that global temperatures have already surpassed the 1.5 Celsius limit in last year, 2024. So the message could not be clearer. The time for action is way overdue. My second point is the fact that COP30, that will take place in Belém, in the middle of the Amazon region in Brazil, this coming November, is a defining moment for the climate regime for many reasons. First, it marks a transition from a negotiating phase to one of climate action and implementation. It's a turning point, Belém. The second element is that we come after 20 years of entry into force of the Kyoto Protocol, and as you said, Madam Secretary General, 10 years after the adoption of the Paris Agreement. We have had time to adjust to now depart from this negotiating phase to the implementation phase. And we have very important steps. We have taken very important steps over this period of time. The recent global stocktake has become a universal benchmark for climate action. It will guide our future cooperation efforts and help set priorities for the so-called 1.5 mission. Now, together with the COP29 presidency, COP30 will lead the roadmap towards $1.3 trillion per year by 2035 to support developing countries in their transition efforts, as agreed during COP28. Now, my third and last point is a final message that we must all seriously ask ourselves, our organizations and our countries. whether or not we're doing enough, whether or not what we do is truly a paradigm shift. Are we just adapting? And in our view, we shall conduct a real ethical global stocktake, bringing together different sectors of civil society to reflect about climate action from the perspective of justice, equity, and solidarity. This ethical stocktake will hear from a diverse group of thinkers, scientists, politicians, religious leaders, artists, philosophers, among others, on their opinion on the goals presented by the country in the national determined contribution. Now, the Brazilian presidency invites the international community to what we call mutirão. It's a word borrowed from indigenous language Tupi-Guarani that means actually working together for a common goal. Usually during harvest, for example, indigenous communities get together, they put aside all their differences and work towards the goal of doing a good harvest. We believe that only by recognizing the urgency of the situation and acting together against climate denialism and in favor of bold action, we will be able to change the course of our future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. So yes, maybe we can use our team of the World Met Day into closing the early warning gaps. Mutirão. Okay. Thank you, dear ambassadors, for joining us today. Now I'm handing over the moderation to Brigitte Perrin from our communication division and Theo Wellington, one of our young professionals working on early warnings, but also on our youth action plan. So with that, we will leave the floor to our colleagues and we will go to the, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. And good afternoon. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Theo and myself will be your moderators today.
Good afternoon, everybody. A lot of interesting and exciting conversations today.
Before moving to our panel discussions, let's have a look at what this World Meteorological Day theme is about with a video.
Did you know that we can see a disaster before it strikes? A storm before it hits? A flood before it rises? A heat wave before it burns? When we see it, we can act. We can trigger warnings, prepare communities, secure livelihoods, and, most importantly, save millions of lives. That's what early warnings do. They turn the unseen into the known. They turn danger into action, threats into survival. Thanks to our joint work and data sharing, today we know that more people than ever are protected. A decade ago, only 52 countries reported having multi-hazard early warning systems. Today, that number has doubled to 108, but nearly half the world is still unprotected. And in an interconnected world, leaving millions behind has social, economic, and environmental consequences for everyone, everywhere. If we want a safer, more prosperous future, ensuring universal access to early warnings isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. Because if we work together to advance early warnings, our work will pay off. Every dollar invested in early warnings saves on average $10 in avoided losses. Investing in early warning systems means fewer lives lost, fewer economies crippled, and billions saved on recovery efforts. That's why, as the World Meteorological Organization marks 75 years of progress, we're scaling up funding, innovation, regional collaboration, and sharing resources to close the early warning gap. Because early warnings aren't just about preventing disasters, they're about securing our future. We invest today, we protect tomorrow.
So today, we have the opportunity to hear from a diverse group of panelists, both here and online. They will share their insights and experiences. I will be introducing them throughout the discussion. To start, I would like to turn to Maureen Hayataku. Maureen, you are the Principal Meteorologist and External Relations Officer at the Ghana Meteorological Agency. Can you explain the importance of early warnings and early action in the context of Ghana?
Thank you very much. All protocol observed. And I want to thank Professor Salo and her team for giving Ghana and representing here myself to share our experience in the context of early warning and early action. As you have seen from the video, the realities are with us, and same it is for Ghana. In 2015, June 3rd, Ghana experienced a severe flood, which was accompanied by fire, and more than 250 lives were lost. In 2003, we also experienced the Kosovo Dam spillage, which displaced thousands of lives and properties. Just last year, during the major rainy season for the South and then also for the Northern sector in their rainy season as well, they experienced a prolonged dry spells. And this affected the agricultural sector, especially the smallholder farmers, the donors, the private sector that invested in this, the farmer that needs to make a harvest out of this to sustain for livelihood, we, the normal or general population that need this food to be able to sustain life. And as you can see, this impact, and as mentioned from Professor Salo's speech, she mentioned that who here can say that weather does not touch any sensitive part of our life, every aspect of it. So with these disasters or impacts we are seeing in our country has changed the narrative for Ghana. The interest for weather and climate services or climate information to make meaningful planning and make sure that this planning makes them to save their decisions, and then the money that are spent in there brings economic impact to the society and then the individual lives. That call has started. So from that 2015 disaster, we had a social platform, which is a WhatsApp platform that is one mostly used. We started sharing weather information to see how best this can narrate, because the intensity, the demand from the stakeholders are increasing. Likewise, from the 2023 flood impact also, investors like World Bank approach us, other stakeholders, ministers, how can we make sure that we have the relevant information to improve decision making? And not just the last one from the dry spell. in addition to also the coastal inundation that we are facing. So this has also been a turning point for GMET, that is Ghana Meteorological Agency. There is no way we can still rely or be in the same position expecting to meet this demand. GMET take these turning points on leveraging on other initiatives, such as projects that comes in, beside these projects to the WMO office that initiated a training on common alerting protocol. We leverage on this to build capacity, which capacity is very important. Another aspect that we also look at in this training, WMO has also started some initiative, which is more of training, giving capacity to the institution to make sure that the information is also communicated and disseminated in a properly manner through digitization. So this bring in the Climb Web, which normally we refer to as the common content management system. In this system, the common alerting protocol is embedded. So with this capacity we've already started, already the platform is there for GMET to be able to practicalize, to implement this innovation that we have started. Another aspect to this is, as weather forecast is important, data is also relevant, because if we have the right data in its right state, it can help drive our global models also at the national level, also to support us nationally to be able to take decisions, improve our forecast, improve research, to be able to meet the stakeholders. Another aspect to it is when we went to COP28, when the UN Secretary General launched the Early Warning for All initiative in at COP27, we leverage on this initiative, and it was a platform that we met other stakeholders, and the discussion started from there. When we got back home, this initiative and knowing the impact we are already facing, the reality is with us. Stakeholders came on board. There were processes that we went through, meetings and steps that have to be gone through. We went through all those processes. And last year, we launched the Early Warning for All. When we launched this, we had to develop a framework. And this framework, instead of making it more inclusive than just having a consultant, the stakeholders have agreed that together we are going to develop this framework. And this year in February, we validate the roadmap. And one common thing that is coming out for us to see how best we can improve early warning and early action was the common alerting protocol, which is coming as a tool for all of us to accept. And this has brought us this far. I could say now in Ghana, with this impact that we are seeing, both from our government, from our stakeholders, from our users, the demand for weather and climate services is increasing. And GMET is also trying its best to leverage on platform, to leverage on capacity through projects, to leverage on initiatives that WMO is bringing up to make sure that we are able to meet the demand of users. I could still say there's more for us to improve, but it is better to leverage on what is existing and help us to grow. And that is how come we can be able to improve and strengthen early warning for all. As said from the speeches, which is being there, further, faster, together we can stand, and resources have to be put together for us to make it. So this is the context for Ghana, and this is how we are improving early warning, and then making sure this early warning is there for early action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maureen. So as we have seen, innovation is essential to close the early warnings gap. To talk more about technological innovations, we have with us today Mr. Florian Pape-Berger. He's the Deputy General of the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecast. Florian, AI is being talked about a lot these days and has tremendously improved weather forecasts in the past decade. What is the real potential of these technologies to close the early warnings gap?
Thank you very much for having me, and I'm really sorry I couldn't make it there in person. I'm truly devastated. I tried this morning, at least. I think the question is quite relevant in that sense. AI is really a revolution, and AI is changing the world at the moment of weather forecasting. We're seeing a progress in forecast skill we've never seen before. And his excellent in Nakosi was really nicely, from South Africa, was really nicely describing a tropical cyclone's impact. I can tell you today that a machine learning model is able to predict this tropical impact with a higher accuracy in the track, with less flip-flopping in the future, also probably with a more accurate forecast of the strength. So it's absolutely fantastic already. So asking me how this can close the gap, there's actually so many different ways. I thought it was quite interesting to listening to Mrs. Ahita Kaku from Ghana talking about data, and data really is the key to that. Not only will machine learning allow you this new technology to better forecast, but also will allow you to integrate far more different data sources, far more different types of information. So far we do satellites, ground sensors, and radio sondes, and so forth. But this will allow you to include cloud-based information, give you exactly those precise, timely, and context-specific early warnings our colleague from Ghana was talking about. So how does this help the wider world? I don't know how you feel about this, but when I heard the number 108, I thought great progress, fantastic. But as a human being, I thought it's not good enough. 108 is just a small fraction of our globe, and we really want to cover absolutely everything. And ECMWF, with the help to its member states, and I'm really, really proud that one of those were represented here today, which was Mr. Lauer from Switzerland, really sort of supported ECMWF for making sure that machine learning is really available to everybody. Some of you may know we've actually generated the first operational machine learning forecast in the world just 2 weeks ago. But we didn't just produce those data as open source available to everybody. We made a model for free. We made the weights for free. We made the training platform for free. So really anybody of you can run this machine learning model on their own, in their own infrastructure, and you don't need us for that anymore. Over that, we provide training, we provide data access, we provide free access to data such as the Copernicus reanalysis data source, which allows you to train those models. And we provide you free ECMWF data in terms of Open Data Initiative. And that really is supposed to help to close this gap. I really think that this enhanced new technologies will be able to globalize resilience. It will democratize access to modeling frameworks. Anybody can do it. You will be able to do it on your own territory really easily. And together with our colleagues from Norway, we're developing a concept called Forecast in a Box, which should make deploying of a machine learning model as easy as you switch on a fridge or a radiator or a microwave. This really should help you to develop your own machine learning model. And we talked about the specific data. And here we have it so nicely on this plot. Forecast is important, so is data. If you have any specific country-specific data, you will be able to train your own machine learning model to those specific data, and you will be able to produce a forecast for your specific region, for your specific problem, for your specific application decision-making framework. That really takes it to the next level. And that's what this new technology really allows for us. What else are we trying to do? I already mentioned ECMWF Open Data. We have an AI weather quest. I believe that early warning for all is also early warning by pushing the boundaries of science. ECMWF mainly produces medium range forecast, which is great. However, we know that the predictability boundary and many countries need forecasts much longer, so they need extended range forecasts. So we launched something called the AI weather quest, where we're looking for the best sub-seasonal, so up to 45 days, forecast model in the world, and anybody can be part of that. And then we're doing things like Code for Earth, where we're trying to collaborative work together in developing the next machine learning technology. I already mentioned Forecast in a Box, and I do really believe that this is at the core of trying to sort of make early warnings available, not just to the 105, 108 countries we have now, but the entire globe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Florian. Now we are traveling a little bit to meet with Ms. Soma Senroy. She's meteorologist at the National Weather Forecasting Center of India Meteorological Department. They are a key player in forecasting and nowcasting in India. And for the past 26 years, Soma has been observing thunderstorms and lightnings, which are major hazards in India. Soma, can you explain why nowcasting is essential for India's early warnings and what are the challenges involved? Thank you. Soma, we cannot hear you. Sorry.
Hi, and thank you, Bridget, and thank you all for inviting me to speak to such an esteemed gathering. Wish you all a very happy WMO day, of course, a day late. The way nowcasting is defined globally is in terms of its lead time of 6 hours for the forecast, though in India we define it in terms of 1 to 3 hour lead time with forecasts. We do this round the clock, 365 days a year for all districts of India. It's a manual thing, but it has a lot of standard operating procedure behind it, involving observations, models, everything in order to issue that level of warning. Because Indian weather, like all tropical weather, has a lot of short turnaround times. So nowcasting is the only way we can address this kind of location-specific forecasts for extreme events. And if you really see, India is a very socially, culturally, linguistically, and weather-wise very diverse. And for us, one solution does not fit all. So how do we go about it? We have to sensitize at the school level, because when we really see the impact, school kids are a major fraction of people who are killed by lightning in India, because afternoon lightning is really around the time when schools go off. And then we do pre-season exercises, short videos, jingles, everything. But one has to remember this. Uh, Really, communication and internet is exploding. This is a time for a very smart forecaster. I mean, what we were thinking 2 years ago as a benchmark is already pretty old. So that is something we need to always keep running, uh, to be with what is going on in the world. So reels, jingles, and stakeholder workshops, tabletop exercises. And again, when it comes to dissemination, which is the most important component of early warning services, dissemination and action, uh, we have to depend not just on, in India, and I'm pretty sure in most countries of the world, the diversity of the population extends from people who are extremely familiar with the latest apps to people who have never seen a mobile in their lives. So we use all these methods, and to be able to do it within time is the challenge. Uh, Again, we are also involved with our neighbors. If you see, the South Asian subcontinent is, in terms of whether a single entity, uh, I would say something like during this recent tropical cyclone Mocha, if you're familiar with it, uh, it was a very severe cyclonic storm. Why I'm mentioning it is because this was one cyclone in recent times, the kind of collaboration that was just being spoken of. Uh, the collaboration between various countries like India, Bangladesh, and Myanmar, they were all affected by this tropical cyclone Mocha, and constant communication, especially Meteoswiss, really cooperated and helped us in this. Through the WMO coordination mechanism, the refugees on the Myanmar Bangladesh border were also given this information. And try to imagine that only 145 deaths happened due to this tropical cyclone. For a similar intensity cyclone in 2008, Nargis, there were 140,000 deaths. 140,000, 1,000 times more. So that is the effect of collaboration. And yes, we are also working with AI, and this is again a smart forecaster, not just a good forecaster, but a smart forecaster, quick turnaround. So AI is the latest thing that we need to go with, and we are going with it. And especially if you see in the climate change scenario, India is going to be especially affected by heat waves. So a lot of our AI based stress, we are stressing more on how to predict very location specific heat impacts, very location specific severity of heat waves, down to a building level in an urban scale. So that kind of urban heat impact is something we are looking at. Besides, as Dr. Florian very kindly mentioned about the AI-based modeling, we are also venturing into that. Pangu weather, we've started working with it, and again for every other. Along with all these, we are also looking towards the response of the public. Are they receiving our forecasts? Are they able to assimilate what we are trying to say? Because we have made huge progress in some sectors, some we have not. Why have we not? We need to find that out. So that is again our target for this future. I mean, recent future. We need to be able to get the feedbacks from different sources where we are failing rather than where we are succeeding. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Soma. 100,000 more lives saved because of collaboration. Now, traveling again, we're heading to the Philippines, and I'm introducing you to Mrs. Thelma Cinco. Thelma is the Chief of Climatology and Hydrometeorology at PAGASA, the Philippines Atmospheric, Geophysical, and Astronomical Services Administration. Thelma, you are leading a very important project, and you are joining from a project site right now in the northern Philippines. Can you tell us more about closing the early warning gaps in that region?
Good afternoon, Bridget and everyone. And allow me to greet you all 75th World Meteorological Day. And I want to thank WMO Headquarters in Geneva for inviting PAGASA to share our experience in implementing an impact-based forecasting. Yes, right now, I'm speaking from Tuguegarao City, where our team is on the ground working to ensure that early warning systems are not just issued, but truly understood and acted upon. For everyone's knowledge, we are now implementing the country's first Green Climate Fund project, the multi-hazard impact-based forecasting and early warning systems. It's a long project, but we just call it mid-use project. So this project is about closing the gap between the first producers or the forecasters and the end users to translate to actions, because a warning only works if people know exactly what it means for them. So one of the biggest gaps that we have is shifting from a hazard-based to an impact-based forecasting, what the weather will do. Before typhoons in our country, we issue TC warnings that is focused on winds. But typhoons doesn't only bring severe wind, it also associated multi-hazards such as flood, landslide, and storm surges. So with this project, we will be working on these 4 hazards. So this is very challenging. But how do we do that? We work with our partners, both from national as well as the local partners. The local partners we are working now is for us to understand what the impact for a particular hazards. We're looking here at the localized from national. We work from the national, and now we are bringing to the local communities. Now, how do we do that? How do translate it to impact? We can quantify the risk by integrating the hazard, vulnerability, as well as exposure. But how will the community can relate that? So we do by looking at past events. How do they relate? So we are looking at the 4 impact levels: minimal, minor, significant, and severe. So with this, we're looking at historical events for them to can relate to. Then establishing that threshold in terms of impact as well as the hazards. There's a lot of communication here, wherein we talk with the stakeholders at the national, sectoral, as well as bringing down to the community. The community is the one who makes decisions in terms of early actions. So what we want to do here in this project is we have a 3-day lead time in terms of the severity of possible high impact to high impact weather. So how do we do that? Of course, for the first mile, for us, the forecasters, we need to have, as I said earlier, to have a good science, because if our forecast has a low skill, then we are also at risk. But then how do we deal with this uncertainty? So with this with uncertainty is that we try to set how do they respond in a pre-impact if there is a low likelihood of that severity of impact, the level of severity, the likelihood, as well as if there is a high likelihood, then they conduct their impact phase, the activation of their actions. So currently, they have their own protocols right now. Transitioning to an impact-based forecasting is also transitioning on how they do things, right? So currently, again, we are on a phase wherein we are working with our stakeholders at the barangay level, or one of the lowest barangay level, wherein we talk with community leaders here, in which they link with the community level. Again, we're still on this process, but towards the end, what we want to achieve here is that the community will act on the warnings that we issue, and we will develop a community, a culture of safety. And with that, yes, that's where we are now.
Thank you very much, Thelma. I would like to know if anyone in the room had a question to ask to one of our speakers. We won't be able to take more than one because we are running slightly late. If any hands are raised. No, I think you have a follow-up question for one of our speakers.
Okay, thank you so much. Yes, I know you've just spoken, Thelma, but you've mentioned a lot about closing the last mile and simplifying complex science for communities. How has co-production of this early warnings helped make it more useful and trusted by the communities in Philippines?
Yes, thank you for that question. Actually, co-production is very essential. What do we mean by co-production? It is communicating and how assessing this risk together. How we, if they we from the beginning of the risk assessment must be done together, so that by doing this together, understanding each other from the science as well as the responders, in terms of assessing the risk, is we truly understand each other. So when we issue that warning, they believe it's very essential that we do the risk assessment together, so that when we issue the warning, they will build that trust to the communities, so that they will act when the warning is being issued. Again, it's very challenging because there's a lot of work, there's a lot of communication, there's a lot of talking to each other, feedback again, and developing this warning. So again, trust is the key, and building that trust by working together is a key, a co-production and co-designing of the warnings together.
Thank you very much, Thelma. Building trust and improving communication is key, definitely. If you have any question, we will save some time at the end of the two panels to take your questions so you can prepare them. In the meanwhile, I suggest we move directly to our second panel. The second panel will talk about the resources and how we are mobilizing and sharing resources to close the early warning gap. We have with us in China this time, Mr. Yi Wang. Mr. Yi Wang, you are director of the World Meteorological Center in Beijing. The China Meteorological Administration, called CMA, is supporting many developing countries to implement early warnings. Mr. Wang, you have the floor.
Thank you, Pretty. Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues and guests, and happy World Meteorological Day 2025. And it's truly an honor to be here today and join this important panel. As we know, the extreme weather and climate events driven by climate change are long-term challenges. So, which is why we believe that early warning is a sustained effort requiring the collective contribution of everyone here. So the China Meteorological Administration, CMA, has been actively supporting the UN's Early Warning for All initiative and collaborating with all partners to help close the early warning gap. So as we know, last November at COP29, China released the action plan on early warning for climate change adaptation for the next 3 years. Actually, CMA has released a cloud-based early warning system, which brings together the forecast products, technologies, and tools into one unified platform. And this system enables the national meteorological and hydrological services to remotely access CMA's global products and other mandatory World Meteorological Center products shared under the WMO's framework, including the global numerical weather prediction products, the Fengyun meteorological satellite data, and cutting-edge technologies like AI-driven model outputs. And all of this is hosted in the cloud to allow users to benefit from continuous updates, seamless upgrades, and minimal maintenance. So looking ahead, we will continue to expand impact-based forecasting, as previous speakers mentioned, and also the risk-based early warning service globally. And besides, I would like to say China has effectively developed early warning mechanism in China, what we call the call and response mechanism. For different lead time and for different government levels. Its objective is to ensure each warning will trigger immediate action and early action, and followed by the confirmation of the stake users or the end users to better prevent the disaster. And to further support the developing countries, CMA will launch 3 Fengyun meteorological geostationary satellites over the next 2 years, positioned over the Western Pacific and the Indian Ocean. And these satellites will provide rapid scanning services for high-frequency disaster monitoring across Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. And most importantly, I think we utilizing a co-design and a co-development approach. So the early warning system can be customized to meet the specific needs of local weather operations. For example, last year, colleagues from the Pakistan Meteorological Department and the Ethiopian Meteorology Institute visited China with support from CMA and worked closely with our team to develop the tools like heavy rainfall and heat wave warning products. And these products have now been integrated into the cloud-based early warning system, which I mentioned before, and are ready for their operational use. So that's my thought at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So now we're beginning to see that resources do not always mean financial, as China has launched a new geostationary satellites over the next coming 2 years. Here with us, we have Carolina Castellanos, Director of the Santiago Network Secretariat. WMO has just recently joined the Santiago Network, which is helping vulnerable developing countries avert, minimize, and address loss and damage. So how do you connect with this loss and damage landscape?
Thank you for the invitation. And first of all, congratulations on the 75 years on this anniversary. Those 75 years are also bringing a lot of experience that is adding value to the response to loss and damage. So congratulations on this anniversary. That is big news for all of us. Now, when it comes to the loss and damage architecture, the landscape has been rapidly evolving. And that is also a demonstration of the growing commitment globally to make sure that there is a response that is informed and also that is coherent to support countries and developing countries and vulnerable communities in addressing and responding to loss and damage. Part of that growing architecture was also shown in the establishment of the Santiago Network. We were established as one of the pillars of this largest landscape that is basically composed of 3 parts. First, there is a policy arm, that is the executive committee of the WIM, the Warsaw International Mechanism on Loss and Damage. We have the Santiago Network very proudly, and we are the technical assistance arm to support the response to loss and damage. And we have the fund that is part of the financial arrangements, the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage. So if I was to choose a word to communicate and portray the role that we play in that architecture, that would be an enabler. We're an enabler of the response that facilitates that the knowledge that is produced by the EXCOM, the Executive Committee, is disseminated to countries, and that is also a feed into the response and their planning on loss and damage policies. And also we facilitate and enable access to loss and damage finance and technology. So that quality of being an enabler is one that we take in the context of the loss and damage landscape, and also is one of the added values with which we contribute to the response. More broadly, also, we engage with different actors that are committed and working on the loss and damage space. And that speaks also to the network of members that we have. We mobilize organizations, bodies, networks, and experts with experience on loss and damage that can also assist in providing a response to the needs from developing countries and vulnerable communities to respond to loss and damage. In the previous interventions, also there were notes with respect to how important it is to have a context-specific response. And that is part also of what we contribute to the ecosystem, making sure that we have a diverse network of members that can provide a response that is context-specific and that is addressing the specific challenges of vulnerable communities and vulnerable countries. There were also some notes indicating how important it is to have the information through early warning systems that can assist in an anticipatory response, but there is a need also to make sure that there is a way to understand that data and also have the responses to act accordingly. That is also part of the technical assistance that we provide by matching those that require technical assistance to address loss and damage with the providers of support in the form of our members. We very proudly also have the WMO, who recently joined the Santiago Network, and those 75 years of experience are now also part of the strength that we have and we can offer to countries and vulnerable communities. We have a diversity of members, some of them very small and with less years of experience than WMO. So that is also part of the added value that you are bringing to our network, the possibilities of collaborating with other actors in the loss and damage landscape and unleashing the potential for a broader response. I stop here, but of course, looking forward to engaging and inviting also those organizations working on the loss and damage landscape to join the Santiago Network as members, and countries and vulnerable communities also to consider planning their requests for technical assistance. We have the templates available in our webpage for those interested both in becoming a member or interested in requesting technical assistance. We are there to support. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Carolina. Now, before we get to some questions, because I think at least I have some questions and you too, and we will also ask the speakers if they have questions for another, because it seems that you are all collaborating to a same effort, and I'm pretty sure you discover also the way of working of colleagues. So let me introduce you to Mr. Niels Holm Nielsen. He's the Global Technical Lead for Resilience and Disaster Risk Management at the World Bank. Niels, how do development banks work alongside of what was presented and what you heard today?
Thank you very much, Brigitte, and thanks a lot to WMO for inviting me to, I suppose, celebrate your birthday and celebrate our collective birthday with a strong focus on global weather observation and much more than that. Look, multilateral development banks are banks. We are owned by our members, that includes our borrowers. All our borrowers are countries. The multilateral development banks tend to have offices and presence and daily dialogue with many stakeholders in all the countries that borrow from them. And we finance what countries prioritize for the country's own development. So that means early warning systems, weather observations, hydro observations, institutional capacity related to delivering services in any of these areas. They are all objectives and activities that could be financed certainly by the World Bank, and I am quite sure probably by any multilateral development banks. In fact, we often do. The World Bank's current portfolio of financing for early warning system related services is quite a bit more than $1 billion US. So we are, I think, important players in financial institutions and partners when countries want to move from what one can think of as negotiations to actions on, frankly, most development topics. So when we're starting to look for and seek measurable outcomes at scale related to early warning systems and closing the early warning system gaps, the MDBs are probably effective partners to explore working with. When you have an MDB involved in financing early warning systems, country ownership, therefore, is already evident, because without it, the MDBs would not have a seat at the table. We really honestly only get to operate anywhere and on any topic when a country has asked us to do so. So that means that the prioritization coming from the countries on early warning systems in a very, very tough environment where many other development challenges always are present, that prioritization is key. Without it, we can engage and finance any services on early warning systems. When we are invited in, however, we probably offer a quite effective platform through which we can both help the country deliver impact on the ground through the financing we can offer, but also bring in, and we often do, WMO and other technical partners and their expertise to complement the development finance expertise that we as a World Bank and I believe other MDBs also have. And a final thought on complications related to South-South learning. We've already been sharing in this conversation today several excellent examples of what's on offer. excellent examples of what some countries have achieved on their own. But I think it's key to stress for me that South-South learning is much more complicated than it sounds, and it's much more costly than it sounds. I manage a team of 50 people within the World Bank that specializes in South-South and South-North-South knowledge transfers. And we basically work every day to try to make it work. A lot of this knowledge partnership work is funded by donors through something called the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery. But while there's an inherent value in sharing experiences, the trick today is not access to information or examples of technical innovations per se. There's an infinite amount of information anyone with access to the internet can access. What we find in our work is that the trick is most often to understand and to be able to help inform a specific problem or a specific decision a national or local institution has prioritized to solve in the moment, and inform it fast enough that it's relevant for the decision they need to make. That is very hard to do in a typical global process environment where solutions transfer in the matter of months or years, not in the matter of days and weeks. But that is nevertheless the key. We have to be much more nimble, much better at enabling the access to the information in the moment needed. And we look forward to continue to work with WMO and with many other partners on doing just that. Thank you very much.
So we've all heard the panelists, and they've all talked about innovation, standing together, and mobilizing resources of different sorts. So we will now be opening the discussion. And if any one of you in the audience has a question, please indicate by raising your hand and we will attend to you. But first I have a question for all the panelists. I think one thing that we've heard reiterated over and over again is the importance of countries taking ownership to close the early warnings gap. So Carolina, we've also had conversations about this, Maureen. Can you please state how important this is in your different experiences?
Yeah, so for GMET, taking ownership is very important to us because that is how we can be able to drive sustainability, because the capacity is within, the people appreciate, accept the system, and are ready to move with this initiative. So taking, for example, the Climb Web, which is currently being developed from the African WMO office, which is currently being piloted with MET institution, GMET, we are on board. This capacity building is being done involving the staff from MET institution. And this is being done alongside and being practicalized in a form of being operationalized. For example, the website that we have now, if you turn to www.meteo.gov.gh, that website we have now was developed together with support from the WMO MET office, which has the CAP embedded in. The CAP forecast that we are issuing now is going into the global system. There's another system, which is the WIS's WMO information system with 2 bots, which is also to help see how best we can improve on data collection, make it more available for use, both at the national and the international level. This capacity building is also involving staff directly in there, which they are being empowered to be able to make sure that they customize, not only customize, but the softwares that are being used, the staff have capacity to be able to modify, and that is how we can drive sustainability. So for us in Ghana, we see this is a way of going for ownership, because we are directly involved and we are being given the opportunity to fine-tune these systems to help us and see how best we can use it to disseminate, to see how best we can use it to improve our services. If it's also going to help us to identify the gaps that we have, and we can even communicate better if those opportunities are not there at that moment, how can we leverage on other existing initiatives, or how can we channel this gaps to become another new initiative that will evolve for us to be able to drive the system. So for us, this is in ownership for us, and I want to use this platform to put to WMO. You are doing a lot for us capacity-wise, but I think one side I could also touch on is if we can also drive the innovation among the staff of the National Met and Hydrological Institution. These are opportunity given for us to be able to tailor-made these tools or softwares within that when these platforms are existing and we have other platforms from even the private sector, at least we have capacity within to be able to integrate these softwares or tools, but not only relying something given to us on now, maybe people are not well integrated into it, and when it stops working, it becomes a challenge. We can't move on. Either it becomes redundant and there is a gap. So ownership is very important for us, and as we are driving the call for closing the early warning gap together, I'm using this platform to add my voice that let's drive innovation, taking this. I know there are others that being done elsewhere in the world, but for Africa, this is a great initiative for us, and we are looking out for that. And today in Ghana, we are also celebrating the World Meteorological Day. In closing this gap, we have brought in the disabilities, because they are also very vulnerable. We've brought them into our institution. They're communicating also with us. It's also a way of identifying how best we can develop technologies, we can drive innovation, bringing in that ownership from that group of stakeholders and making sure that together as a community, we are moving and driving the action to save lives and property. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maureen. I don't know if on the resources aspect, we have any question in the room so far, and we will then again have some time for it. It doesn't seem to be the case right now, but as Niels mentioned, that the trick is not to have the technology. It's neither to have the access to the technologies. The trick is more to inform. And I would like to know what Florian thinks about that. Florian, do you think that you can do as technology provider, do you think you can help on that last mile? Or what do you think about this issue of having the technology, being able to get access to it, but not getting to the last mile?
I think this, thank you very much for the question. I think this perfectly connects to the previous question on ownership, because machine learning really gives us a new way of a very easy to apply technology with a lot of different industry experts, which far go beyond meteorologists or physicists in that sense. So it's a much wider field, but I think it's really more than that. So we just talked about ownership, and so we're going to circle back to your question. Is ownership is great, and everything we do is to ensure that ownership is with the relevant agencies and authorities. But I think I want more from you. I would like you to take leadership in using our own data in machine learning. I would like you to take leadership in producing forecasts with these data. And I would like you to take leadership in communicating the results and translating them into actionable information. Ownership is great. Leadership is, I think, something you can achieve with machine learning even more than ever before. In many areas, many of you lead already, but you can do even more with that. And that sort of closes the gap to the final impact sector and the warning sector. So circling back to your question. So leadership, more, ownership also.
And now maybe has any of the speakers a question for another speaker? I don't know if someone online, oh yes, okay, Carolina, and if someone online has a question, please raise your hand and we will give you the floor straight after.
Yes, many thanks. I have a question from Maureen, and pleased to meet you here, and also appreciate your contributions, bringing also the experience from a meteorological service in Ghana, and also how you manage the consultation processes at the national level. And my question is in relation to that. because for us, for the Santiago Network, at the heart of our mandate is having a response that is demand-driven and that is aligned with the needs from countries. How do you manage from the meteorological service in Ghana, undertaking the consultations that can effectively help you identify the needs at the local and national level? How that takes place, that national coordination, and what would be the most effective way for the Santiago Network also to support those efforts and to facilitate that coordination so you can come up with technical assistance requests?
Thank you very much for your question. And as I mentioned in my reflections, weather and climate services is relevant to all of us. And having seen the impact we are seeing in our day-to-day life, if we prepare the forecast and it does not get to the end user in time, no work is done. And that means all the value chain, the stakeholders or users along the value chain that are needed, we need to strengthen our collaboration. Last year, when we launched the Early Warning for All initiative, has also been another turning point for us to see the collaboration, because we can all feel the impacts. So when we sit around the table, we are looking at the reality to discuss our issue and then put the measures that will help. I will not say what we are experiencing now is the perfect system. They are still challenging, but we are seeing improvements because the Met institution itself is also taking that proactive step to make sure that our information are becoming relevant. Yes, products are there, we need to engage. So what I would advise is, but one thing I also like to also emphasize is, yes, it's good to prepare for the response, but what will be the benefits when we strengthen response, putting all the infrastructure in place, and we do not receive the early warning enough to plan and know how that hazard that is going to impact that beautiful infrastructure? Taking, for example, as I'm sitting here, if I don't know that there's a dip before me and I'm playing, if nobody wants me and I fall, my impact that I'll receive on myself or the injury will be higher. But if someone prompts me that there's a dip before me, I should be conscious as I'm playing around here. Even if I should fall, my impact level will be lower. And this is how GMET, we are driving the narrative back in the country. It is about time we re-engage ourselves, especially taking stakeholders that are involved in initiative, meeting them and discussing. His Excellency mentioned that we need to avoid duplication. I think there's a lot of duplications that are ongoing, and sometimes some of these things are resulting because the people who are responsible are not taking their rightful position to provide what is expected. So going forward, we need to engage, let's approach those who are responsible. Yes, I know there are challenges along our ways, but these challenges are also ways to help us to prepare ourselves to engage, identify our problems, and help. So to your team, I also recommend, in as much as you are preparing for these responses, the countries or the institutions you are helping, make sure that the Met institutions also align properly, that the information they are providing, respectively, including data, are really available to drive your decision, to drive your support, to drive your responses. And I think together as a team, we can be able to move forward. Thank you.
Yeah, no, many thanks, Maureen. That's very eye-opening. Also, how communicating impact can help us get a response, raise awareness at the national level. I would like, if I may, also to ask the same question to Telma from the Philippines. Also, how at the national level you coordinate internally to identify a response and the needs that you have at the local and country level for those to be communicated to different organizations and initiatives. Thanks, Telma.
Yes, thank you for the question. Actually, for the Philippines, we have this existing structure. We call it the National Disaster Risk Reduction Council, wherein we have identified 4 pillars from preparedness and mitigation down to the response. So there are specific agencies that is already in charge of these 4 pillars, and PAGASA, or Department of Sciences Technologies, is in the first pillar. But how do we now sift these are current capacities that we have from the national? We communicate, we forecast from the National Met Agency. As we forecast, these warnings are being discussed in the Office of Civil Defense. Now after that, that warning is communicated down from the national, regional, provincial, and down to the barangay level. So we have this communication down to the community level. But what we are translating now is towards impact-based forecasting. So how do we do that? First, we call all the sectors. We identified 6 categories in terms of sectoral. Then one by one, we do focus group discussion in understanding the impacts per sector. Then they try to identify the impacts at the different impact levels and how do they respond to this. So they need indicators, the indicators for this different impact level. And what we have currently is we also have this JRIS, wherein exposure data is already in our system company, a sister agency that is handling this JRIS data, where we can do a risk assessment. And what we plan to do, because currently risk assessment is done by each of these institutions. So what we plan to do in this project is we're going to have this knowledge decision support system, wherein the first is the decision as a module for the forecasters. And in the middle is decision support system, wherein each of the sectors will be doing their own risk assessment, wherein data is being shared among agencies, and in which the risk assessment we call the pre-disaster assessment. Is actually the impact assessment will be done together with the different sector when we have a high impact weather. So that is the plan, wherein local leaders, local chief executives will access to this decision support system. Can they call, and they will also going to conduct their localized impact assessment, wherein they know which is the most vulnerable area and where could they going to respond to, and in which we're going to have an app wherein the community will have access into the warnings, and that is the plan. But currently we have these platforms that is still not harmonized. So in this project, we're going to harmonize all these activities that have portals, and to have the aim is our disaster managers from the national is they want to have one map that they can see from the national down to the region, to the community level. That's what we aim to have in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, given our theme today, closing the early warning gap together, it's important that we recognize that this starts first internally. At WMO, we've been working hard to bridge that gap by working with young people in shaping climate, weather, and water services. I'm proud to be one of the many, many young professionals who've been co-developing our first WMO Youth Action Plan. This aims to improve youth participation and engagement across the WMO. And just like early warnings are about thinking ahead, so are our young people. Today, we are joined by students from a high school in Saint Julien, who we will now open the floor to ask their questions as well.
Bonjour, donc je me présente, je m'appelle Candice Malvaux et je suis ici avec ma classe provenant du lycée Madame de Staël à Saint-Julien-en-Genevois en France dans le cadre de notre spécialité d'histoire géopolitique. Et ma question porte donc sur les stratégies qui sont mises en place en fait pour améliorer l'éducation et la formation en sciences climatiques, notamment dans les régions où l'accès à l'éducation est limité.
So I repeat the question just in English in case not everyone has headphones. What strategies are in place to improve education and training in climate science, particularly in regions where access to education is limited? And I would like to give the floor to Yi Wang to respond to this question.
Okay, thank you very much for your question and the translation for me. For me, I think CMA has hosted the WMO designated regional training center, 3 regional training center located in Beijing and Nanjing respectively. I think in the past decades, with these regional training centers, we have been providing the on-site and also the online training for the WMO members, especially in the developing countries. And we also plan to provide more opportunities to train more than like 1,000 talents from developing countries, and also provide more than 50 visiting scholars over the next 2 years to come to China. We will support them to come to China and for the capacity development, and especially to co-developing the early warning systems to better close the gap for their weather operations. And also regarding the climate science, and we also have provide many training resources on our open accessible website. We have developed the World Meteorological Center Beijing's website, and just in last year, we have set up the international workshop under the WMO framework, and all the training documents and workshop documents, especially the AI technologies, are published on the website. I think it will be a good resources for the trainees to access and learn by themselves. And yes, that's my response at this moment. Thank you very much for your question.
No worries. We also noticed that there is a question from the audience, so we'll give it to the audience before we come back to the students. So yes, please. Yeah.
Yes, hello.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Franziska Hirsch, and I'm a secretary to the UNECE Industrial Excellence Convention. We enjoy close cooperation with WMO and also with UNDRR, and in fact, we'll be organizing a joint early warning seminar towards the end of this year. And I was particularly interested from the experiences of the countries who presented and also WMO overall, to which extent you see examples of true multi-hazard early warning systems. And here, particularly in my role, looking at industrial installations, I'm interested in knowing about examples of early warning systems that don't only look at natural hazards and risks, but also look at technological hazards and risks that are present in the same basin, be it tailings management facilities or just industrial installations that could be affected. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And if I may, could I direct this question to Mr. Soma, if you can answer this question?
Okay, thank you for the question. Actually, you're right. Industries and especially our offshore oil platforms. We've had recently quite a few incidents of severe damages for offshore platforms during tropical cyclones. So now we do have special bulletins, special wind warnings, and sea wave warnings for the offshore installations over the Indian seas. That is one aspect. But it is not just the tropical cyclone. Regarding our power consumption, our power sector is very much dependent on the forecasts of heat and thunderstorms, as well as fog, the transmission lines and transmission centers, power transmission centers, they're very dependent on that information. And we regularly have a close coordination with them, and we have developed specific products for continuous updation for these sectors, for the power sector, for nuclear reactors along the coastline, for offshore platforms. For each of them, specialized forecasts based on the threat perception. We do issue forecasts for them. Yes.
Thank you so much. Now we have one more question from the audience, because we have to be mindful of the time. At the back, yes, you can ask.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you very much for these wonderful presentations and discussions as we celebrate the 75th anniversary of WMO. But the international cooperation in meteorology and early warning dates back to 1873, which is 150 years, when the International Meteorological Organization was established. My name is Roddy Guzman. I work with the Secretariat for about 30 years in various positions, including Director of the Strategic Planning Office and Special Advisor to the Secretary General. In today's discussion, there are so many things that can be brought up, but I'd like to refer to 4 topics that I would wish the panelists could address. One is on disaster, second is early warning, third is gap, and fourth is resources. In the video that we saw earlier, if I'm not mistaken, it referred to the observation of disasters. Wouldn't it be more appropriate to speak of observation of hazards? Because the same hazard could lead to different disasters depending on where they strike, depending on the vulnerability and other consideration of the countries involved. For example, I come from the Philippines, and we have tropical cyclones called typhoons, the same as in Florida. But the effect of tropical cyclone in the Philippines is more on harm than on property. Whereas in Florida, the effect of a hurricane is more on property because of development, buildings, and less of the people. With respect to warning, some of you will remember that in 1970 in Bangladesh was struck by storm surge from a tropical cyclone, resulting in 700,000 deaths. And now in 2007, that became less than 5,000. Mainly, of course, improvement in early warning. But early warning consists more than the forecast or and the like. It also depends on how you communicate, as already been mentioned. For example, one can communicate the center of a tropical cyclone by giving the coordinates longitude, latitude, and may be technically correct, but it doesn't mean much to the user. So when you ask people in our field, what is the most important aspect of improving in early warning, many would say accuracy. But I would like to submit that's not so much accuracy, but usefulness. You might be technically accurate, but if it doesn't mean to the users, it doesn't mean much. On early warning, what I'm trying to say is that it's not just a preparation of warning and forecast. And you have mentioned, sir, about a term that I would suggest we consider instead of closing the gap, bridging the gap. If you consider the Grand Canyon, which has a width of anywhere from 8 to 18 kilometers and a length of about 500 kilometers, if you are going to close that gap, that would be a lot of work. But maybe what we could do is bridge the gap. For example, it's been mentioned that maybe it's not just improvement of facilities, but training of people who will be in leadership would be a major way of bridging the gap. So
Thank
that
you.
in terms of resources, we should be able to convince decision makers that resources provided to our services for the protection of life, property, and livelihood, to the safeguarding of the environment, and contributions to sustainable development are not expenditures, but
Thank you very
investments with a rate of return.
Sorry to interrupt, but we are conscious of time and we need to finish in time. So
okay,
if you can just wrap up
I will
and
finish by referring
you.
to the 5 resources that we use, the 5M: man, money, machine, method, and material. And we should be working so that to convince. And there is at least one administration currently who is now suppressing activities in this protection by curtailing the personnel and finances of their National Weather Service. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So now it is time to wrap up. I'm sorry, we cannot take any more questions, but I would like to get back to our speakers for one sentence for each, like 30 seconds maximum. What did you learn today? Starting with Maureen, from this being together, what did you learn today?
What I've learned today is for us to achieve the goal we've set in strengthening early warning, we need to work together, we need to strengthen collaborations, and we need to be able to fine-tune solutions that are pertaining to our environment, our culture, and our tradition. Thank you.
Many thanks. One of the takeaways that I'm getting from today's session is the power of anticipatory response, and that early warning for all is not only for all in terms of availability, but for all also in terms of having a tailored response.
Thank you. And online, Florian?
What do I take away? There's so much to take away. It was truly interesting. Thank you all for that. I learned the sad news that a lot of school kids die in India from lightning. If I want to close any early warning gap, my goal will be that less kids are dying from lightning or any other natural disaster or any other hazard or whatever we want to term that in the world. And that will be my goal. And I hope that's all of your goal, because I can only achieve that if we all work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Soma, your last words.
If I learned something, science should come out of the lab and come to the people. That is the only thing. I mean, two things. One is we cannot do everything ourselves alone. A strong chain, both at the national and international level, needs to be built, and that holding of hands has to continue, not just for one instance but throughout. It's a dynamic relationship that has to evolve. The other thing is science should not, which I liked what Florian said and what Nielsen said, One is science should not be restricted to high-power computing systems. It is now in the reach of people to get accurate, good forecasts without knowing much of high physics that is necessary. And it is not information, it is not technology, it is to take a decision and transmit. That is the job. That is not very big if we keep working on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nice words. Telma.
So a lot of learnings from this discussion, but one thing that strikes me is leadership, not training the leadership, because in this engagement where our goal is that people just don't hear our forecast, but they trust them and take action when it matters most. So what I hear earlier is bringing together all from the science, communication, and everything together so that communities will act, is that we also need leadership. And that is what it strikes me today. Thank you.
Thank you. And Yi, your last words very quickly because we are getting to the end.
Yeah, very simple. I learned a lot from this session, and I believe once again collaboration is very, very crucial for achieving the early warning for our goal. Not only one country or region can achieve that, but everyone on board can work together to moving towards the final goals to protect everyone on Earth by the 2027. It's our everyone's goals, and we should work together. Yeah, thank you.
And finally, Niels, you have the very last words before we hand over to our Secretary General.
Wow. Well, I always learn a lot in this kind of conversations. I clearly have learned that the wealth of knowledge we collectively have at a global level is amazing. I sort of had an instinct about that already operating in this space. But I think I also, again, reinforced in my understanding that all of that doesn't really matter unless countries and people like Soma, like Thelma, that are part of this conversation, unless you drive the questions that you need information to help you answer. The leadership is with the countries, should be with the countries. It can never be from people like me at a global level. We can contribute and we can help navigate the wealth of understanding we collectively have, but we will achieve nothing in terms of outcomes unless it's the countries that drive the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, innovation, standing together, and mobilizing resources. Can we give a warm round of applause to our panelists? Okay, so with that, we conclude our panel discussion on closing the early warning gap together. I now have the pleasure of handing over to our SG for her final remarks.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Of course, I would like also to thank not only the speakers and all that participated and joined the session remotely, but all those that are here, because it means that you care. And for me, that's the starting point. Of course, I want also to thank Carlota. I hope that you enjoyed some of her drawings that we will also share with you. Our technical team that have been supporting us, interpreters, Brigitte, Theo, for the preparation and the moderation. I will not repeat because I think that all the reflections from our colleagues were great. I think that what I would like to say, it's as mentioned by Floriana and mentioned by other colleagues, we cannot afford losing lives when we can do something to prevent that. That is our ultimate call for action. Action has been repeated several times. Leadership as well. I will tell you something. Leadership is not only on some people. Leadership is about all of us taking our responsibility at our role. Despite the role we have, we all can be leaders. I invite you to become the leader of today, tomorrow, for a better future, not to have any kid, any person killed by a natural hazard. Thank you very much. Happy World Met Day. Please, you are all kindly invited to join to our reception on the World Med Day at the attic, where we will share food brought by our staff and our colleagues. Thank you very much. Please join us.